All right. Welcome everyone to the September 11th, 2024 meeting of the Regional Transportation Advisory Council. My name is Stella Jordan. I'm the Public Engagement Program Manager at the Boston Region MPO, and I will just walk through a few housekeeping items before we get started. So first I'll read our notice of non-discrimination. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process, regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. You can read the full notice of your rights and protections at www.bostonmpo.org/mpo_non_discrimination. Our accessibility statement: this meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards, and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, or if you have any technical difficulties, please contact me, Stella Jordan of MPO staff, at sjordan@ctps.org or at 857-702-3675 or via the Zoom chat box. A few guidelines before we get started. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. You may mute and unmute yourselves during the meeting, but please do remain muted unless you're actively speaking. And to participate in the discussion, please select the raised hand function. You can find this either by clicking on the participants button at the bottom of the screen and a window will pop up with a raised hand button, or the reactions button in the toolbar and the chair will call on you. And if you're joining by phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. And with that, I will hand it to Len for introductions.
Thank you, Stella. So yes, let's go around and do quick introductions. So I'll call your name and you can just say what your affiliation is, and we'll go from there. So John McQueen.
John McQueen, Walk, Massachusetts.
Thank you, John. Andy Rieger.
Andy Rieger at the City of Cambridge. I'm a transit planner here in the Community Development Department.
Thank you, Andy. Derek Cravat.
Yep. Hey everyone, Derek Cravat from MassDOT Office of Transportation Planning.
Thank you, Derek. Franny Osmond.
Hi, Franny Osmond. I'm from Acton, Mass, and I come to transportation lately through the League of Women Voters of Massachusetts Legislative Committee, but I'm just here as a resident, and I'm the outgoing vice chair.
Thank you, Franny. So Hannah Switlikowski. Did I get that right?
Hi everyone, Hannah Switlikowski. You said it perfectly, Len. And I am the Deputy Director of the MBTA Advisory Board. While we don't officially sit on this committee, oftentimes we will listen in or participate as needed.
Thank you. Always welcome. Logan Casey.
Hey everyone, Logan, Town of Marblehead.
Thank you, Logan. Sean Rourke.
Sorry, couldn't find that mute button. Sean Rourke. I am the Manager of Communications and Engagement at the Boston Region MPO.
Thanks, Sean. Tyler Tarasi.
Hi, folks. Tyler Tarasi from the Metro West Regional Transit Authority, MWRTA, Government Affairs Officer here.
Thank you, Tyler. So next we have public comments. So if anyone from the public, now that we know who everyone here is, we want to say anything, now's your time. Okay, and so next we'll do approval of minutes if we have a quorum.
We do indeed, and apologies in advance for the volume of minutes we're bringing today. We had a couple of special 3C meetings that we're bringing minutes for, and we didn't have an August meeting, of course, so we're sort of knocking a bunch out at this meeting. So I am open, I guess, to however folks would like to approve these, whether one by one or in a batch. I'll leave that up to all of you.
Yeah, so I would say, if someone has, a correction that we need to make, to a given bunch of minutes or given set of minutes, we can pull those out, and approve them separately. And if it ends up being all of them, each of them, then we'll go through one at a time. Otherwise, we'll just approve them, in whatever sets we have. So any comments, questions, corrections?
I move that we approve the batch.
Can I get a second?
I'll make the second.
Thank you, Andy.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Andy.
so yeah, so in some groups, the notion is that you don't have to be at the meeting to approve of them. You're simply saying that I attest to the fact that I'm confident that these minutes are correct, based on the fact that people who were at the meeting, they don't have any corrections. So with that, maybe we can do a quick roll call on these.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Len Diggins,
Yes.
John McQueen,
Yes.
Andy Reeker,
Yes.
Franny Osmond,
Yes.
and I believe Anna Christina just joined.
Sorry, I'm late.
No problem. We just approved the minutes, AC.
Oh, okay, yes.
Thank you.
Great. All right, that motion carries. Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks, Stella. I know it's a lot of work, and so I appreciate it. And so, so next we go to item number. So yes, I'll be turning it over to Tegan to talk about the main subject of this meeting, which is implementing best practices in membership and in advisory group structures. So to the current executive director, and of course, we finally remember her as the previous chair of the advisory council. Tegan.
Great, thanks, Len, and hi, everybody. I'm really glad to be back in front of you. I really enjoy the conversations that we have, and this one is certainly a significant one. So I didn't actually get to introduce myself at the beginning, but that is perfect because one, no, I know all of you, one, so that makes that easy. But two, I did want to set a little bit of context before I get into this topic, just kind of about where things are with the MPO and with where I'm at before we get into the topic. So I'll just say, I think everybody here, I know you, just in case you don't know me. I'm Tegan Teich. I'm the executive director of the Boston Region MPO. I was first exposed to the MPO when I was working for the city of Cambridge. Hi, Andy. Andy and I worked really close together at Cambridge. And when I was there, I kind of Andy plays the role now. I had a seat on the MPO, on the advisory council, and the council members gave me the honor of electing me as chair for 4 years. So during that time, I served the role at largely that Len is serving now. And that really ended only when I decided to pursue this role as executive director of staff for the MPO. So I had a lot of kind of awareness and appreciation for the work that you do. And I just kind of wanted to start with that and say that what I've been doing over the last 5 years as executive director, we've talked about this when I've come to this group, usually about once a year, to kind of talk about the various things that I've been focused on and what my priorities are in my role. Really first, I think I had a very heavy focus internally looking at staff and staff structuring. And I really looked at restructuring and reshaping how we worked as a staff to the MPO. And one of the many changes we made in the first several years was to establish an independent communications and engagement team with the expertise to really help us transform our engagement work through the MPO. So that's why we have Stella Jordan here with us today and Sean Wart, and there are 2 other members of the team who are not here now. but that represented a massive expansion in our capacity relative to what we had before in the engagement and communication sphere. So that was one of the many ways in which we really looked at and restructured our staff internally. And then also I've been working with board members and committee members, but board members primarily to work on how we can reform the structures and the work that's done at the board level as well. So over the last number of years, we've created new governance documents, new MOU, operations plan that have policies and procedures laid out, new forms of collaboration that we've never really identified before. We've instituted new committees for engaging both board members, but also others who want to engage with the board. We held an annual meeting for the first time, among other things. So I just kind of wanted to put this conversation in the context of a lot of change that has been happening over the last 5 years. And next, what we're here to talk about today is a really important step, which I propose as a bold step to implement the best practices that we've learned about in terms of engagement for advisory groups to NPOs by talking about a restructuring of this body. So that's the very kind of big picture preview of what I'm going to talk about. I have structured my presentation in 2 parts. I have not officially timed them, but I suspect that the first part is going to be roughly 10 to 15 minutes of me talking about the concept of the restructuring, the why, and kind of the basic what, and then pause there for discussion because I think it is a pretty big topic. It has obviously a massive influence on you all in this room. And so we just kind of want to talk through that together. So that'll be the first pause for discussion. And then I want to get back to a few more slides to really talk about what this will look like over the coming months. So a little bit more specifics, and then get back to another conversation and discussion about those. So just a reminder, I'll have two-part presentation, and there'll be 2 opportunities for discussion just to keep us structured. So with that, I think we can get into it and go to the next slide, Stella, if you don't mind. All right, so first, I just kind of want to talk about some of the challenges we've been talking about lately. So this group, along with staff and board members, have already been discussing some of the problem statements and questions that have really shaped how we've come to this strategy that I'm presenting today. These kinds of questions I'm going to summarize here in a moment aren't new to this year. These are things that we talked about to some degree also while I was chair, and probably some here may remember prior to that as well. But I do want to point out that these are very concrete questions I think you all have been discussing and working on with staff over the last, say, year or so. And those are, the first being, how can the advisory council membership really become more diverse so that it is representative of what is a really broad range of public perspectives in the region, including voices that are currently underrepresented. So we want to also be able to do that relative to the kind of representation that also exists on the board and committees now, which has also evolved over time. And the next slide, or just next, I guess, yeah. Another question has been, how can we align the work of the advisory council as closely as possible and as supportive as possible to the NPO's overall engagement program and engagement activities? In the last decade, the field of engagement has really significantly evolved, certainly significantly in the last few decades. And the representation on the board, as I mentioned, has evolved. So we need to really be thoughtful about how we evolve the advisory council in the context of all of that other sort of shifting and growth that's been going on. And then the third bullet, please. I think I've also heard a lot of conversation about how the advisory council can have a more direct impact on NPO processes and decision-making. I've heard in this group, and I heard when I was chair, concerns expressed around feeling more reactive in terms of how discussion is able to happen at the advisory council level, and wanting to be as proactive as possible into the input into the NPO decision-making. And also that there's been concern that the input that you've given doesn't have the kind of impact that you hope it would have in those processes. And like, what can we do to fix the way that we make that happen so that the input can be most impactful? Next slide. So over the last year, we've explored some of these problem questions with you, and we've engaged in some research and planning to help elaborate on them. So for example, staff conducted a peer review of advisory groups to NPOs, and the findings of that were presented and discussed with this group a number of months back. I think it was perhaps back in maybe earlier this year anyway. We've also staff have worked with you to have a conversation about updating the description of the advisory council's role in the MOU, the Boston Region MPO's Memorandum of Understanding, and that is now also being implemented. And also kind of an interesting planning element that came out of these conversations was a pilot community planning lab that was informed by some of the ideas and generations of Len in this group. And we are piloting our first community planning lab in September, actually next week. So we're really looking forward to see the outcomes of that as well and look to how we can expand on that. Next slide, please. So what have we learned through all of that? You know, especially through the peer research, what I want to emphasize here is that the kinds of questions and concerns that we've been discussing are not sole for the advisory council to the Boston Region MPO. This group is not at all alone. Our MPO is not at all alone in exploring these challenges and trying to come up with ways in which we can address them and have the most effective structure for an advisory council to be able to accomplish those goals. And so there were some kind of more specific lessons that we pulled out also from the peer review that were presented to this group. Next slide, please. I want to run through those. So one was that there needed to be successful, it was very important to have a very clear definition of the purpose and function of the advisory council. And I put it in parentheses here, that's something that we have worked together to accomplish through the MOU update process. And so that's something I think we've made some great progress on already. Next, please. So also one of the best practices that we learned and that Stella talked about previously was that an applications process is actually a really important element of a successful advisory council. I think that the idea of a process, a selection, application selection process can seem counterintuitive to inclusivity. But the research and the interviews that we did really demonstrated that it has the opposite effect, because by inviting people to a kind of a curated process and by being selective, we can ensure both that there's an effective spread of representation, but also demonstrate to potential applicants that that this is a role that is taken very seriously and that we expect, all members to participate in a meaningful way into the process. So it kind of does generate a sense of importance in the process and buy into the process that actually can increase the diversity of the representation in a group where really broad perspectives are coming to the table. And so it can be really difficult to manage that in a way that is inclusive of those different voices. And then in addition, with a process in place, we can actually learn more in a more organized way about what members need and are looking for and what we can do to engage them. That really helps inform in a detailed way the meeting plan. So the way that we would structure the meetings going forward. Next slide. So another important element of the lessons that we learned is that a strong staff role has a very positive effect on the ability for the advisory councils to be effective. I know this sounds self-serving, but bear with me. By having staff really take a role of sort of leadership in the organization and structure of advisory councils, it helps to ensure that there really is that incredibly close alignment exists between what's happening at the MPO level and what's happening at the advisory council level, so that we can do everything we can to really maximize the impact of the feedback and engagement between the groups. It also helps to make sure that we're ensuring the strongest possible connections to the engagement program as it's ongoing. So day by day, even not just month by month when the meetings are happening. And it also means that we're tapping to the best of our ability into the engagement expertise that the MPO invests in to be on our staff. And then finally, I think Len and I have both had really long terms as chair on this council. That is often not the case for a variety of reasons. People are not able to commit that time. Having the chair and the vice chair as very important partners and collaborators, all this is important, but having a strong staff role helps to ensure consistency in transition between leadership of the advisory council, and also given that different members of leadership at the advisory council might have some slightly different approaches to how they want to run the meetings. The strong staff role can help kind of maintain a level of consistency negotiating through those kinds of transitions. Next slide. And then finally, when it comes down to it, you know, there's an emphasis on having a really strong framework for the impact that the board, the advisory council is going to have. And that really translates to what the governance document should look like. So next slide, please. Yeah. So when we talk about our governance structure, and I'm talking about potentially when I'm talking about the sort of what will be like a new group structure, it's really important that the new structure has ownership over whatever the governance of that new structure will look like. So it has to be oriented towards where you want to go, rather than necessarily where you are, you know, in the current day. And that creates a sense of ownership and also a really powerful framework going forward for how that impact is going to occur. So next slide, please. So what this takes us to is the strategy for restructuring. There is a need, I believe, for a significant shift and really kind of to create a really novel path forward for the advisory council. The idea of restructuring is disruptive, but I also think it is the most constructive way to enable this region's advisory council to mimic those best practices that we just talked about. And also a restructuring process will allow us to make a really effective transition into a newer approach to membership recruitment and meeting planning and governance structure. So to make that successful, what we need to do for a restructuring process is have this group continue for a period of time to really inform and provide us with the greatest depth and kind of understanding of what you all bring to the table, what you have learned through your engagement with RTAC, but then actually sunset the current structure and have a break during which we institute a new membership process and a new meeting plan structure for the advisory council going forward. So that involves a full sort of pause and reset with a distinct break that enables us to then launch a new structure for the advisory council. So what that will look like, thank you, is the winding down of the current structure through several more meetings. And also in addition to that, a number of focused one-on-ones and small group debriefs to really help us deep dive with you into your experience and engagement with the MPO. What's been meaningful, what hasn't been meaningful, all of the lessons that we really can learn from each of you who have put so much of your time and commitment to it to date. We will also continue to engage you during that wind down period in various ongoing engagement activities. And then we will have a gap between the last meeting with the current structure and the initiation of a group with a new structure, with a new membership process and a new meeting plan that works to achieve those goals that we've talked about. And that gap will allow us to kind of finalize and tweak with the input we've heard from you, with the lessons we learned from the community planning lab, to really be able to kind of inform the processes that we'll put into place during that pause. And then after that pause, launch a new group with a membership based on that process and a meeting plan that's catered to that group. Next slide. I want to end the presentation of that strategy with the intended outcomes. It's always really important. The reason for doing this is really focused in these three areas. It's to diversify the membership, to make sure that we're representing that broader range of public perspectives in the region. Some of that perspective is in the room today, and a lot more of it does exist outside of this room. So really focusing on that and the underrepresented voices that we know that we don't necessarily have in the room, in addition to those who are. The alignment of the advisory council's activities with the MPO's engagement program and engagement activities to the greatest and deepest sort of degree possible. And then also to enable that the advisory council has more direct and kind of significant, meaningful impact on the MPO processes and decision makings in the way I know we all intend for this group to have. So that is where I would like to pause. Next slide, please. I know this is a very bold plan, and I know this is a really committed group who has been attending for, I think, most of you for quite a few years. And so it does deserve some time to kind of discuss and process here together. So I'm going to pause there, Len, and just sort of welcome questions and comments before I moved on to the second part, probably shorter part of the presentation, to discuss a little bit more detail about what the transition looks like.
Sure. So can you see the participants when they raise their hands, or do you want me to?
It should elevate them to the top of the list. I have like a small screen, so I should, let me.
Yeah, if you're looking at the participants, then usually when they raise their hand, they pop up at the top. I'm fine with you just calling on people as you see them, but if you want me to moderate in that way, I can. It's your call.
Okay. I'm happy to just have a conversation with folks and moderate it myself, just to make it more of a conversation.
Sure.
I like that better than the formal process of calling folks as well. But why don't you raise your hand or let me know verbally if you have something to say so we don't get more muddled than that. So just comments, questions, reactions, thoughts. Okay, I think I see John first and then Franny. So why don't we do John and then Franny?
Hi, Tegan. Thank
Hi.
you. Could you describe a little bit about the planning lab?
With that, I will pass it actually off directly to Stella, who's going to be shepherding this. Stella, why don't you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe we gave sort of an overview of what the scope and what the plans were at the last meeting, but essentially this is an educational program that we're starting up and just really doing a pretty small scale pilot this year to kind of understand what the needs are and what the opportunities and challenges might be so that we can hopefully continue to expand this type of work. But really, this is an idea that came out of a lot of peer research and also was really championed by Len over the past couple of years. And it's something that we've seen a lot of other agencies do as a way to kind of bring more people and more voices who aren't really as plugged in already to the planning process or to the transportation planning world and the technical elements of it, to kind of give them the resources and tools through, you know, an educational program that really considers their needs and does really thoughtful engagement and includes like interactive activities and things like that, to really empower them to then be able to be more robust advocates in their own lives and in their own communities for the issues they care about, to, you know, the MPO or even to other agencies or entities.
Thank you. That was helpful.
Yeah.
Can I have a follow-up?
I'm fine with that.
Oh, no, actually, I'll let Franny go and I'll do a separate.
Okay. All right, Franny.
Hi. I want to thank you, and I had technical difficulties right when you were in the meat of how you were going to, how this reboot would happen. But I'm glad. I just wanted to sort of make a comment and a question. The comment being, it seems like it really is a challenge. And so I acknowledge that the problem with the work of the MPO and advising the MPO is that there's so much variation. There's so many things. There's a variation in geography. There's a variation in types of transportation that we're talking about, you know, all the way from freight to transit to highways. I mean, everything. And so there's such a, if you think about representation on this committee, it's hard to decide what kind of representation we want. And I do feel like in the days when we were in person, there was more variety. And so that's the sort of challenge that I see. And the sort of question was, have you talked to Stella or Len and heard sort of like what I've been sort of thinking about membership as my role on vice chair and wanting to examine the list of all the people that have been involved in the last 15 or 20 years and see what categories they are all in, you know, in variation, and also reach out to all of them with questions. And I sort of drafted a sample letter that I gave to Stella. So I just wanted to sort of know if that would still be wanted to sort of give you a little bit of extra data as you start this process.
Len, did you want to say something before I respond?
No,
to
no,
that?
no. You
Okay,
respond.
just checking.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Yeah, so yeah, Franny, I do know that has been part of what's been explored in some of the work you've done. And we have you know, listings of attendees, and we have some sense. We don't have quite that depth of a full picture yet at this point, but we have a sense of kind of who's been showing up and when. And we really, I would say, and Stella, feel free to correct me if you think I'm misrepresenting anything, but we really have seen, I think, you know, a slow decline in the breadth of the representation. It doesn't mean quality or anything else, just in that breadth. And I think part of that has happened during this time that things have been more virtual. I don't want to say that the virtual is the cause for that, because we have no reason to think that. But I would say we saw a similar trend during the time as well that I was chair. And similar to what you've been exploring recently, I worked with my vice chair and we did a survey to a whole bunch of the members and non-members in the region at the time as well, and got some input through that process. We made some incremental changes as a result of that and got some input. And I think that there's value I think there's value right now to really downloading in depth the experience that you all have been engaged in the advisory council have had. And then through some other processes, like through kind of the engagement work that we are doing in various communities, through the community planning lab, and through other processes, that we are working to gather the similar kind of information as to what you're thinking about with the letter and the broader group that you were thinking about. And then we have to kind of think about what is the best use of sort of the resources and the time to get that perspective. And that's what I think it would be really helpful for the staff to take over kind of the leadership of, to be able to figure out how to best implement that. And given the connections that we already have and the linkages between as staff, between the service we do with the committees, with the board, and with the communities that we work in. So very aware of that. And I think there's some value in that. I think that it can't get us the full picture just because of who will selectively respond to that kind of inquiry. Will get us some of the answer, but not necessarily kind of the full package we need to do this reset in a really effective way. So that's where I like to defer to the expertise we have with Stella and with others on staff to really find those nuanced ways to pull out from those various sources and make it a really effective transition. Stella, do you think I misrepresented anything there? Just before, sorry, Franny, I want to make sure. Okay, she says I'm okay. I didn't.
No, but I'm happy to help as needed. I'd be happy to, put together any incoming data. And so just let me know what
That's
you
great.
want me to do or
That's
not.
really great.
Continuing and that process.
That's really great. I really appreciate that. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. And we'll be continuing to talk with you over the coming months about that. So thank you.
So John, you can go ahead.
Hope you're still muted, John.
Oops, there we go.
Okay.
Yep. Couple of things. If just in terms of recruitment, perhaps it might go back to the MPO board members and have them go into some of their databases or colleagues. For instance, Eric Barassa, MAPC, and people like that who have a broader reach, perhaps, of people that are very interested in, well, community development, which really relies on transportation. And they might be able to pull together a representative list of good candidates, and not necessarily from their own towns, but they're familiar with other people, I think, thematically, just as an interest. Secondly, it seems like this is a great move because it seems like it's going back to where we were earlier in Regional Transportation Advisory Council type of connection, I guess, with the MPO, where we were involved maybe earlier in the curve of initiatives or major thematic issues or projects. For instance, I-90 or the Accelerated Bridge Repair Program, or major things that were going on like that, and where we really had a role in opining in terms of improvements, how to perhaps make it better or process better, or bring together another perspective on community impacts or things like that. But we were, I think, as you remember, or even earlier than that, it energized, I think, the group because it helped them feel impactful. And that what they were doing was meaningful. So I think this is a good move, and by getting involved earlier with the issue formations at the MPO level is going to be helpful, I think.
Great, thanks, John. A couple of things. One of the things that you brought up, working with our partners like MAPC, who have these deep also relationships and contacts with people in the various cities and towns and communities. This is one of the other real challenges we face and why we think a restructuring and kind of revamping is so important. And that's because, however many years ago, as this group's been evolving from that point, we didn't have all of the same level of additional forums in which people were providing and contributing input. And so what we need to do is make sure that the advisory council is understood as has the structure for a level of input and impact into the MPO that is not duplicative of some of those other forums and is really supplemental to all the additional engagements, the activities that people engage in. And that's something we really want to reaffirm through this process, to really think through and have a good membership process and a meeting plan restructure. And then on the second point about the impact, again, that is a central goal here. And again, there are now different forums than there used to be to provide impact. We have everything. We have new committees like the TIP, Process Readiness and Engagement Committee, right? The board member structure looks very different than it did 2 decades ago. We're adding a seat to represent the RTAs on the board. The way that the conversation happens at the board is different. So how do we ensure that the advisory council is structured to maximize the impact, given some of those other shifts that have been happening? And that's the focus of this time in transition as well. It's just responses to your comments. I hope that's helpful, but I really appreciate it. I take a couple notes too as you're making comments. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tegan.
Yeah, Len, it's your turn.
But yeah, so I'm going to extend on this a little bit and then come back to something else. So I guess in terms of the input on projects early on, I mean, as you were saying, Tegan, there are now, other ways that we go about getting that public input. So almost every major initiative now has so many meetings with the public all over the place, hybrid, usually some in person, and so I don't know to what extent that was available 2 decades ago or a decade ago. But there certainly is a lot of it now, and partly what I saw as a role for this group, but more so for the planning lab, which I initially was thinking of more as a learning group. Initially, when I was thinking about it, it's like MPO University, and then I thought academy was a better word for it, where people really learned the details. Because when it comes to making an impact on the board's decisions, there aren't a whole lot of decision points. There are more now with the TIP Process Engagement Review Committee, which I think we initially thought was going to meet every other month, and then last cycle we realized it needs to meet twice a month when we're hot and heavy on developing the TIP, and so but in order to really give useful input, you need to understand a lot. You really do. It's a fairly intense learning curve, and it takes a while to get there. The only time there's no substitute for real learning. It's a function of effort and time, and there's just no shortcut for that, and so I had envisioned the community planning lab being that mechanism by which we committed to helping people learn the process, and then they would self-select out as to people who would want to participate in the advisory council, with the intention that at any given point in time, anyone from the advisory council could be on the board making decisions that were helpful to the board, and because I see our role of the board as being one of providing a benefit to the board, in terms of its decision making, and so I don't know if that's really the intent of the planning lab now as it's envisioned, and I'm a little concerned about the ability of the restructured board to get people to the point where they can make those decisions, if there's not really a real focus on doing that. I mean, there has to be really a commitment to doing that. I mean, and it's taking its toll. Me, I mean, the intent is to make the changes rapidly, as opposed to be kind of like the 10-year horizon that I had for us getting there. You know, and one other comment I'll make about participation. You know, because I'm involved in Arlington a lot, and so there's a lot of desire to do civic engagement. And in Arlington and other communities, it's becoming increasingly hard. And I think it's just that people's lives. People are just so much more connected now. And they're doing a lot. And you're going to find the people who are inclined to do this kind of work. Are already doing. Either this kind of work or work that's related. As you know, housing is really big, but transportation is really big, but other people are doing other things. So it's going to take some effort, and I encourage that whatever you do, that you don't be discouraged, by the slow uptake, because it's just hard, and it doesn't mean necessarily you're doing something wrong. It's just hard to get people to this kind of work, which for some may not be as impactful as they would like it to be. We see it as impactful because we're down in the weeds. But I think a lot of people might go, I don't know. If spending on $200 million a year, on a lot of projects of various sizes, is really what I had in mind. But as I said, it's not going to appeal to everyone. But be persistent in what you in your attempt. And so I'm going to stop now. I said I was going to say something else. But I'm going to stop now because I can't remember exactly what you're going to cover next. And I don't want to step on that. So I'll say anything else for later. Thanks.
Yeah, we can certainly just continue the conversation after I get through the next stage. One thing, Glenn, I'll just say as well to this whole group in response to that is education is really important and really critical, and it is a really complex field. One of the benefits of making sure that that the staff role is the strong role. One of the reasons why it's like sort of a best practice to have this really strong engagement expertise sort of staff role in organizing this is because if we want to have diverse perspectives, we cannot expect every one of those diverse, representations of different perspectives to have the same. We do want to educate, but we also can't expect everyone to have the same ability to sort of tap into, absorb, and understand, the level of education that many of you do as well. So they have to be willing to come to the table and do the work, but we also really need to work to ensure that we're educating, and also we're helping to bring that meaning and translate that meaning for folks who don't have quite the same level of deeper understanding that some folks, again, like in this room right now, do have about the process. So we need to manage that actively. We can't be passive about that if we do want to achieve the broader representation goal that is part of the advisory council. So I think those are really great comments. And to your point, no, it will not, even with kind of this bolder plan to have kind of a disruptive moment to enable a new process to go into place. It won't have nothing, it won't crystallize all right away, but we'll maximize our ability, I think, to get there as efficiently as we can with this approach. And so with that, maybe I could just get then to the next couple of slides and give a couple of those more details to grab onto and think through so that it's helpful for us to continue the conversation. So next slide then, please, Stella. All right, so this is a draft schedule and what a plan like this can look like. So the proposal is that there would be, as I said, several more meetings of this format of the advisory council. We're meeting today, we're talking about this plan, and you all will talk about nominations. And I'll talk about what that might mean in the context of this plan as well in a moment. But you all have nominations, and at the next meeting in October, you would have elections, and there's other topics we can bring to the table. We can talk about the lessons learned from the Community Planning Lab. We can talk about kind of other engagement activities going on, or projects or the things that you're interested in and deeper diving into as part of that. And then similarly in November, except that we will want at some point a final sort of wrap up meeting of this structure that really does celebrate what this group has been able to accomplish. And that might go along with some engagement successes as well, like the final engagement guidebook. So that would be, for example, another kind of quarter ahead of us in terms of having that ability to continue some work with this group. And as I mentioned, in parallel, doing some deeper dives with each of you, some one-on-ones, some maybe some small groups, to really kind of pull out all of these great like observations and learnings and advice that you all have from your experience. And then take that like moment to then sunset where we're at today, and take a few months to really take all of that we still learned over these last several months to finalize the restructuring plans, what the membership is going to look, what the membership process is going to look like, what the meeting plans are starting to evolve into looking like, et cetera. And then in say early the next calendar year, launch that process, start to work to implement the meeting plan, and at some point have a first sort of new meeting, a meeting of the new group. So that's what a schedule can look like. And we'll have to sort of think a little bit potentially as we're going through that finalizing process during the break to make sure we kind of refine, you know, the exact months for these things. But this seems ambitious, but real, but feasibly ambitious to us. Next slide. Oh, and so yeah, the transition period as laid out on that slide was December through March. So that's what I wanted to kind of highlight there. Thank you. Sorry. Next slide. So then just kind of going back to what does this mean for you, for the individual here sitting in this room, for an advisory council member, and on the next slide, it'll be the chair and the vice chair that are elected. So again, there's a lot of activities that we can do kind of going on over the next several months. We would prioritize as staff, we would prioritize discussing and finalizing the public engagement guidebook. I've mentioned several times already, having these, in addition to meetings, these one-on-one small group debriefs to really get your perception, understanding, and learnings of how the public engagement has proceeded to date, and your thoughts moving forward. We want to discuss the lessons learned from the community planning lab. We want to make sure we're actually celebrating together. I see some people making comments. That's great. Thanks. Celebrate together the accomplishments, the work, the commitment, and the accomplishments that this current group and structure has put into the advisory council and the input to the MPO. And then, of course, we'll continue to update this group as we work on the work we're doing to work towards the transition and beyond. The next slide. And there also continues to be a role for the leadership. So following the nominations election, there will be chair and vice chair still. And up until the transition, and to some degree during the transition period, we'll want to continue advisory council representation at the MPO board meetings. I mean, in essence, I think it's important that we don't have a long break of any kind in terms of a representation of either the past form of this group, the current form of this group, or the future form of this group, depending on when that meeting is, on the MPO board meetings. We want to maintain that input process throughout, even though at some point, it will need to transition. And I do want to be clear with you all here today. I've discussed this, the strategy has been discussed and we're vetted with the chair and the vice chair of the MPO board. But we haven't discussed it with a full board yet, because I feel like it was much more respectful to come to you all as a group first. And so just be aware that the full board doesn't yet have this kind of understanding of the strategy, because we wanted to talk with you all first. And then the important note here, though, is that once launched, the new group, it will be based on a new membership process. You could see many of the same faces, and you should see new faces. Some of you may continue to participate. Some of you may choose to participate in MPO processes in different ways. There will be a new group and a new structure, and that configuration of what the advisory council is should be responsible for electing its own membership and confirming its governance documents. Next slide. I'm almost done, John. I will do this very short, this part. So just to kind of emphasize that what will happen during the transition will really be focused on finalizing the application to lead to the membership structure that we're looking for, the work plan for the meetings. We've also been investigating and exploring the use of incentives to incentivize more diverse representation on the board, on the advisory council, excuse me, I talked to the board too much. And then also incorporate learnings from the community planning lab and think about launching that as a more robust program going forward as well, if that is feasible and meaningful. Next slide. And that was what the second stage. And so I know, John, you raised your hand, and I'm happy to go back. Since I knew it was short, I figured we could go back to any slide you had a question about. John.
Just a quick question. With this new RTAC, is it going to have a new name? I mean, it just seems like it's going over complete rethinking, and you're looking to create perhaps a new identity. I just was wondering whether that it would retain the same name, or or have something more reflective of its probably changed mission or modified mission, not changed, but adjusted, amended mission. So that was just a quick question.
Yeah, I think that's a really important part of this process, John, to figure out. And I really appreciate the proposal. It's occurred to me that that could be part of this group's process and conversation, the new group as it's being formed. One interesting note of history is that RTEC is the second name that, or Regional Transportation Advisory Council is the second name that this group has had since the 1970s. The first was the Joint Regional JRTC, the Joint Regional Transportation Committee. That was how it was originally launched back in the 70s. And it turned into the Advisory Council, I think in the 90s. I'd have to look back at the date. Maybe the early 90s, late 80s or early 90s, it switched into Regional Transportation Advisory Council. That's just an interesting note. And it went through a significant re-envisioning around that time as well. So just a note of interest. Len, yeah.
Yeah. So a couple things. So the question is the reason the advisory council has a seat on the board is why?
The reason the reason has evolved slightly, but the fundamental basis for it, which is still stated in the MPO, is to ensure that there is a seat that we are able to have a voice to represent in a voting voice on the MPO, kind of a broad group of stakeholders, and a diverse set of perspectives into the MPO process. What that means, though, has changed so significantly. When the JRTC was founded and had that similar mission, the board was made up of 5 entities, and it was the MBTA Advisory Council, Advisory Board, excuse me, MAPC, and 3 different state representative agencies. That was 5 members on the board, and JRTC had something like 40-ish assigned members. It was very complex. It had to have representatives from designees from the board members. It had representatives from cities and towns. It had representatives from certain community organizations or stakeholders. And more of the fundamental debate and kind of conversations where there wasn't agreement to reach consensus happened at the JRTC, and then voting decisions were made at the board. Since that time in the 90s, and then, well, actually in the 2000s, in the late 90s and early 2000s, some of that representation that never existed in the board has been brought onto it. Municipal representation primarily now exists. We're adding a seat for regional transportation authorities, the non-MBTA, MWRTA, and CADA to rotate to be on the board. And in the meantime, the advisory council had evolved away from that kind of strict structure of all of these different participants, I think acknowledging that they weren't getting that participation as the board was evolving, to what is now sort of this very kind of open, if you come and attend, you can, and you're going to put in the work and commit, you can be part of this sort of diverse stakeholder group that provides input into the MPO process. So that's the kind of the point has stayed relatively the same, but the context in which you've been doing this work has changed so dramatically. I think that's worth just putting out there, because I think that's part of our thinking through. It means something different to say that even 20 years ago than it does today.
Yeah, thanks for that thorough explanation. My question was actually a little more narrow. Yeah, and that
sorry.
is no problem. No. I just didn't ask it right, but I'm not happy to have a lot of information, because I was happy that you gave people that background, because you've given me that background. I think that's really helpful to know. How what the advisory council is now is very different from what it was before. But is it mandated by law that the advisory council have a voting seat on the board?
It's mandated by the MOU.
Okay.
It is often a federal expectation, and is something that is often, if there were no body like this, I think it's very feasible that the feds would comment on that and recommend that the board consider that. But it is not legally mandated, I think, in the sense that you're stating. But the MOU says there will be an advisory council, and it will have a voting seat on the board. Right.
But the feds just want us to have, each MPO to have a advisory council. That advisory council doesn't necessarily have to have a voting, doesn't necessarily have a voting seat on the board, right?
It does not have to have a voting seat on the board. What the feds want is the pathway for broader representative input into the MPO processes. That's what the feds really want.
Right.
Whether that's exactly an advisory council or not, I will say advisory councils are quite common. I've seen some data on how many MPOs, but it's not even a rule that all MPOs have an advisory body like this per se, or it can look very different. It could be like they have a bicycle and pedestrian advisory body. They have, you know, one's focused on different, it can look very different.
Right. Well, I mean, the reason I bring that up is that because I could see this transforming into more of a high functioning focus group. Because I think maybe what I want in terms of someone who's on the board, because as I have come to appreciate just the level of complexity, and it's delicious complexity. I mean, when I think about the criteria and the work that we put into developing those criteria, and how I think those criteria can be really helpful in us selecting good projects that meet all the goals of the MPO as indicated in the LRTP. It's just I think it's a great exercise, a great way to learn how transportation works, and how it touches everything. But not only do you have to have members that are like an advisory council chair that is willing to get to that level, but you also have to have it with respect to all the other seats, and those are elected seats. And some of them have pretty much been held forever, and it gives some stability, but some of them change, and there's always this tension between like getting in new people, but then having them in a position where they can make the decisions. So maybe I'm just like aiming too high with respect to the level. I'm using this word loosely, all right? Please forgive me. The level of competence, when it comes to really understand the material, which takes like I said, it's a function of time and effort. There's just no shortcuts around that. But if this group became more of a high functioning focus group, where you had people that you could reach out to, that you have a lot of diversity, and you're not expecting them, to understand the criteria and the history behind the criteria, or necessarily even understand the nitty gritty of the tip, or even the LRTP for that. And you just kind of bring to them, hey, this is what we're working on now. We'd like to get your input. We know you. We value you. Maybe we have a history with you, so it gives us a little more confidence in what you have to offer. Then either they would be functioning at the same level as some members of the board, or if they didn't have to be on the board, it would be even less pressure for the chair who's going to be on the board. Because I'll tell you, I don't think you really want to be on that board, and especially if you're representing the folks that you are a part of, and not feeling comfortable with what you are expected to know. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, no, it makes sense to me. I share that sense of hefty responsibility and of understanding what you're doing when you're trying to make informed decision making in a very complex process as the chair of this group. I will also say that this is a national topic in addition to a topic that we're having. There's a lot of loss of institutional knowledge on staff and on boards, and there's also a lot of effort being put towards how to sort of increase education and awareness and understanding of what the federal regulations are, what's required. AMPO has released has initiated an institute themselves to help with some of that kind of board level focused education, board and staff, but they're going to do different modules based on like different roles that people have. Various other MPOs have other kinds of institutes they've launched for their own boards or other participants. We're launching the Community Planning Lab as a pilot, as an educational process. We've also created a new orientation presentation and package for new board members that we're going to be kicking off this fall. So it's an ongoing problem and challenge that you are totally tapping into, Len, that I can only support and just say that this is one of the core challenges of engaging effectively with an MPO, is the complexity of the process and how hard it is to spend the time and get up to speed to the degree that is often expected. So great comments. I think you made sense. You made sense to me.
Thanks.
Steve, how you doing? I don't think you were here from the start.
Hi, Steve Olenoff from the Trick Subregion. Yeah, past chair of the Regional Transportation Advisory Council. So I
Yeah.
want to give you a little history, and unfortunately I missed half of what you said, but
Oh,
just,
it's too bad.
yeah,
Yeah, I love to hear your voice on this as your own historical institutional knowledge with all of this.
yeah. So I was just talking about whether you should have a vote on the advisory council should have a vote on the MPO or not. I'll go to history on that. Is they originally didn't, and I think it was about the time they changed the name from JRTC to advisory council, which is, I think, isn't that the same time we expanded the voting membership of the
Correct. I think that
the
all happened
MPO.
at the same time. So was that the
Yeah.
late 90s? No, I'm trying to-
So you're asking me dates because I've been around
Okay.
so long, I couldn't tell you anything like that. But well, it must have been the late 90s because
I'll find it. I actually have a timing.
between 95, yeah, about that time. Anyway, so it was a very big deal when the advisory council was given a vote on the MPO. Everyone really on the advisory council really wanted that, and they felt it really made a very big difference. And I think it has made a big difference. It's just, well, the MPO just takes the advisory council more seriously when there's an actual vote there, and the chair who sits on the board, rather than just sitting there and adding to the discussion every now and then, actually has a vote. It makes a very big difference, and that was a very big move to give the advisory council a vote here. So are you considering removing that vote now?
That's not part of the conversation,
Okay,
absolutely,
yeah.
at this point, Steve. That's in the MOU.
Yeah.
And the description of how our TAC works has been updated to better match both kind of existing conditions and the intent. But there's not any discussion that I'm aware of with the board or the governance. There's nothing that I'm aware of to discuss any change in that. And I don't know if you saw my comment. It was 2001 that happened. It was more recent than I was saying. 2001, JRTC became the Regional Transportation Advisory Council and got a vote. That's also when the membership expanded to include more municipalities. Not that long ago.
Yeah, so I just want to give that history that when all that happened, and yeah, it was a big deal at the time. But of course, the expansion of the MPO, giving more votes, and the fact that the majority of non-state agencies, became a majority, so they could vote the state. That was very significant, also. So you're talking about reorganizing, it's still the advisory council. I would, as far as changing the name, I would say it's the name change originally from JRTC was, first of all, it didn't seem to have much meaning. No one knew what it really meant. It didn't convey what it was all about. The Regional Transportation Advisory Council, that really conveyed, just the name of it conveyed what it was and what it did. So I think that's why that was very important in changing that name. So I probably should, I don't know if we should be changing the name at this point, for historic reasons and because it works. I don't know how you would come up with a better name, but I'll have to read what you're proposing more.
I think we'll have to, so just to sort of come back to what's coming up, we are going to spend more time in the coming months with each of you, sort of one-on-one and or in smaller groups. I'm just not trying to constrain us as to what that looks like, to talk through your experience and understanding and your input into all of that. And so, Steve, that is something that, one, you should take a look at this slide deck and or the recording. Happy to talk with you more. And then also we have committed already, we're going to have some more conversations with you and other members of the council. So yeah. So
I mean, there's no doubt that the advisory council has gotten kind of stale, and it either needs to go back to where it was back in when there's more activity and more things happening at the advisory council, when there's larger membership, there's larger participation. When I was chair, I used to really strive to get more participation, and I would do it by getting good speakers. and I'd always try to say, okay, I used to chase around. I remember waiting at the top of the stick of the escalator to well, the MBTA director at the time used to go out for smoke. So when he came back in, I was right there at the top of the escalator, say, "Hey, could you come and talk to the Regional Transportation Advisory Council?" And he couldn't say no at that point. So I'd always get the head of the T. I'd get the some of the state legislature. I get all these important people, and the secretary spoke every year to the advisory council. We seem to have gotten away from that, and so I want to see what you have to say. But it would be nice to, boost it up and get it functioning more and getting more things happening.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Thanks for those comments. And again, I definitely would recommend if you watch back through this presentation, I'm always happy to chat with you more and explain more context. And I love your historical knowledge. I think while we're always trying to move forward, it's just like understanding, and I've been talking about some of that context, understanding that historical context is so useful. I do want to say that I think we're coming up against the amount of time that I have for this agenda item. And again, we will at least have several more meetings together. But Len, did you want to make a separate comment, or did you want to transition me?
Yeah, I'll set up one comment and then you can respond to it, and then we'll transition away, and just to say, like, why I had brought up the notion of not voting was, it was based on the question, should we consider changing the name? Generally when I hear a question like that, well, that's an interesting question. I had thought of it, and then it's like, if I were going to rename the group, what would I call it? I pretty much call it like a Regional Transportation Focus Group, because I think you go in, well, I was going to say one or two directions. One where it's more hardcore, where you really learn stuff, which was my motive, or my way of operating the meetings, usually bringing topics from the board meetings that we would go into in more depth, and so it became less entertainment, and bringing in stars, and more more like really learning and bringing in staff to talk about the studies and draw into the studies, so that we could really know what's going on. It's one of the reasons too that I was like, we're going to go through the needs assessment, because that's the basis of how we make decisions. We really need to understand that, and yeah, it's not sexy, but in terms of really understanding stuff, I felt it was really necessary. So we need to go in that direction, or we go into one, that is more, well, hey, let's meet people, let's make these connections, let's understand how you feel about things and think about things, and we get to know you, get to know us, and you can give us more information. And to me, that's more focused. You can do the hybrid, and that would be ideal, but the hybrid really shouldn't come at the cost of the learning. So the hybrid actually becomes more work, but I think anything worth doing, generally requires a lot of hard work, and so we just can't shy away from the hard work, and hopefully the people you reach out to will know that, so that's it. So you can respond, and then we'll move on.
No, thanks, Anna. I'll just say, I agree, and we're really committed. For us, it's also, for staff, it'll be significant hard work in a really positive way, though. I think just to kind of wrap it up, I'll just say, I think we need to keep in mind, all of us together, the goals coming out of this. It's always important to keep your eye on what the goals are, and I think we can get there. I'll just highlight that some next steps are, we do want to discuss this with the full NPO board, and also give them a chance to process and understand the upcoming transition. So that will be a next step. Stella will continue to work, with this group on sort of what's next for this group, and then next coming couple of months. I'm always happy to come back, if that makes sense. And yeah, we have a lot more work to do, that's for sure. John, did you want to add anything before we wrap up, or?
Yeah, just, I guess, going back to maybe a decade or so ago, but to Frank DeMacy's tenure and contributions, something that to us has been relatively lost, that's a really major factor in roadway transportation, surface transportation, is the freight committee and impacts. And Bill Kuttner, bless his heart, was always able to dial us in, maybe every other year or so. But it's a really significant factor as we're doing or redoing I-90s or alternate routes or things like that, and to try and deal with congestion, to add a more understanding of where these go and the shifts of where the distribution centers are and how that's going to impact, domino effect of the roadways and such like that, and competition for them, and whether or not rail is another option eventually again. So that's something that maybe could resurface, I think. I don't know if there still is a formal freight committee, as I think there was at one time.
There's not one now, but we have a new freight program manager. Bill Kuttner is very hard to replace, but we have a great new freight program manager, and she's thinking through those issues as part of her program as well. So
yeah, great.
I appreciate
Thanks.
you bringing it up. We're definitely not forgetting about freight. It is critical. Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Definitely critical. So thank you very much, Tegan, and I'm sure you'll be back soon. I will be working with Stella on the agendas for at least the next 2 meetings. That process always been a matter of touching base with staff. To determine what it is that staff wants to present at the meetings.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Thanks for the time, and thanks for all the comments. And I will sign off as I close out my presentation. I'm going to sign off and pass it all fully back to Stella. And I look forward to continuing the work with you all. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you. So now we're going to transition to the nominating committee and to tell us I'll turn it over to the nominating committee and they'll tell us what they want to tell us about nominations. AC?
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Did Franny step out?
I don't see her.
Okay. All right. She must have had to step out. Well, we sent out a letter. Stella sent out a letter. If anyone would like to put their hat in the ring, so to speak. Otherwise, we do have Len is being gracious enough to sit as our chair yet once again, and Andy Reeker is also going to be stepping into the vice chair role. But they are open nominations, so if anyone again wants to be considered, if you could contact myself or Franny, and we will, get a form together formally. Is there anyone who would like to nominate someone else or themselves on the call at the moment?
And I'll just add that you can wait until just before, at the meeting, just before we vote, early when we bring up the topic, to nominate yourself or anyone else. But those who are nominated, at this point, will be expected to, submit a
bio,
a little bio or a little letter, explaining why it is that they want to serve in the role again, or for the first time.
Okay, so I think, I would formally like to nominate you, Len, to be chair and Andy to be vice chair. So I don't know if we need to have that formality, but I am stepping in and nominating you both.
Well, thank you very much. And for my part, I will accept it, of course. And I'll let Andy tell us whether or not he's changed his mind.
I have not changed my mind in the last few days. Obviously, I think, with the information we received today, it may be a relatively short term compared to other previous terms, but I think in this moment of transition, I'm happy to take on the role of vice chair. So I'm happy to be nominated, happy to, if there's a competitive race when the time comes, I'm also happy for that too. Gladly accept the nomination. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, then I think we're good. Again, if anyone wants to nominate someone or themselves, do contact myself or Franny or even Stella, and let us know if we can put your name in. And that's it.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I mean, and I want to express my appreciation again to Andy, me for being willing to be the vice chair, because I know that his role being at Cambridge is very busy and demanding. So, um, so with that, we'll move on to chair's report, and I really don't have a chair's report at this point in time. So. I wasn't sure how long this was going to go, but I just didn't pull the other chair's report, So, old business, new business, members items. Yes, Steve.
Yeah, so I thought I'd bring it up. Because way back when they first opened up the Greenboro line, we arranged a field trip for the advisory council to ride on the train before it was open to the public, and we got a nice train ride, and fun because they were on these test train rides. So that's happening now with the South Coast Rail. They're running test rides.
Ooh.
So it might be a good time, and they've been doing it between now and at least January. So it might be a good thing to have a field trip and ride on that train and have everything shown to us what they've done.
Well, it is a good idea, so commuter rail, so I could work with Stella to see if we can pull that off. If Stella doesn't have the connections, I think I have some connections over at Keola's, and can try to work those and see if we can get that done. Unless, Steve, you're familiar with the process, and how to go about formally requesting, making the request.
Oh, just talk to your favorite person at the T and say you want to do it.
Okay.
Or talk to Jean Fox, who's in charge of the project. She'd be the person to contact.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for that suggestion. So yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, maybe we'll have the last meeting in November on the test ride. But no, that's a great idea. So we'll try it and make that happen sometime before the end of November. All right. So that's some. Why don't we call that a member item and new business? So any other business, old business, new business, members items?
I have one member item, which is to say that the city of Cambridge is actually hiring. So I know we have a small number of people here, but if there is anybody who knows of maybe a kind of senior technical traffic engineer who may be looking to either jump from the private to the public sector or has been in the public sector for a while and looking for a step up, we actually are trying to recruit for somebody who has maybe some traffic signals experience, and wanted to just drop that in the conversation here because I know a lot of the folks here actually know a lot of people, and I'm sure that they might be some good candidates for us to consider amongst your network. So just gonna drop that as a member item from Cambridge.
Great. Thank you, Andy. And in that little bit, I was reviewing the August MPO meeting, and now I kind of remember one of the things that I did want to say, was that we had the MPO has done a corridor study, and it's a study in Braintree, and Route 37, and it's a very interesting study. And when they presented it, I had suggested that they come and present to the advisory council so that we could have more time to go through it with them. But then when this change to the advisory council came up, then I didn't work to have it on the agenda. And as I said, I just didn't work then to put together a chair's report, because essentially the chair's report at that point would have been what Tegan talked about. But I do want to refer you to that corridor study, because that's a UPWP study. A UPWP study, and it's something that we do care about, and it's a well done study. As I said at the meeting, I think what they have done in terms of being able to present a lot of interesting, complex data in a way that is easy to take in, but not dumbing it down. I mean, and I think it's really very impressive. Some really good graphics in it. I mean, and just lots of information, and the appendices give you kind of like all you could want and then some. So I don't know if we will have someone in to talk about that. Probably not. But I would say regardless of what happens to this group, I mean, the MPO does really good research. I mean, and even if you don't go to the meetings, I mean, they post all the materials, I mean, to the website, and you can always go there and pull down PDF of interest and read it at your convenience. So that's it. That's my report. So with that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I guess I made the motion and it was seconded.
There we go.
There we
You're
go.
a leader, baby.
Yeah, there we go. So all right, folks. We're out of here. Take care. See you, next month. And once again, we'll work on see what we can do about that test right. Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Take care.
Thank you.